Hello again. I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 16, joined by Blake Lovell and Max Barr. We are here to preview and predict an outcome on Mississippi State's trip to Auburn. You can catch that 6 Central on Tuesday night on the SEC Network. Both teams coming off kind of rough weekends. The Bulldogs lost at home, ran into a red-hot Kentucky team, although State played exceptionally well, in my opinion, having watched the game. Meanwhile, Auburn escaped South Carolina in a game closer than anybody expected, but that wasn't the big storyline. It was the loss of Broom for what looks like at least a couple of weeks. The Tigers now, Max Barr, return home to Neville Arena without the guy that was coming into Saturday, the front runner for the National Player of the Year.
Yeah, and I mean, just take your guess at a betting spread for this one. I have no real clue what to expect, but KenPom has it as Auburn minus 13. I think that's a bit ambitious. I think it'd be more like Auburn. Yeah. That's not going to happen. Yeah. So that's obviously with Broom. So I think it'll be more like something like Auburn minus 8.5, something like that. Chop a few points off that spread. But when you look into the matchup a little bit here, guys, what I first do is I go to what Blake normally does, and I look at a little bit of history here. Mm-hmm. And Auburn, I don't know if I'm going the direction you think I'm going here, but Auburn has only lost one home game in the past year and a half. That was that really, really weird 70-59 game against Kentucky last year where both of them shot like less than 50% from pretty much everywhere. Very weird game. And you want to go back a year more, they only lost 2 games at home in the 22-23 season. So you're on a 2.5-year streak here of only losing 3 games at home, which is a pretty strong indicator of where I may be going in this game. But that hasn't even dove into the matchup yet, and I think it's going to get pretty interesting here without Broom.
Yeah. The spread, I think, is what's going to be most fascinating here because every metric tells you that this should be a double-digit game, but it's just we don't have the sample size. I always like the sample size here. You know, we have a half on the road against South Carolina of Auburn without Broom in terms of these kind of games, right, in this kind of setting. Now, yes, you go back to what was it? Who were they playing? Was it Georgia State? Yeah, Georgia State, where he played 2 minutes, right? But that's different than the second half of South Carolina and then a home game against a team that I said my opinion has not changed much on. Even though they lost at home to Kentucky, my opinion did not change in Mississippi State. It's the same as it was before. I think they're really, really good. I think they're a top 15 team. I think they're pushing for a 2-3 seed in the NCAA tournament. And they're coming into now the jungle to play a team that, yes, they won that game at South Carolina, but look, it's different. Like, let's not kid ourselves. We've talked all year long about the depth of the Auburn Tigers. Historic start to the season. Offensively, all the metrics will tell you they're having one of the best seasons of any team ever, like to this point in a season. But like we also just can't ignore the fact that they're not going to have a player who's also, by the way, had one of the best starts to a season of any player in decades. And so it's just, how do we factor that in against a really, really good opponent in Mississippi State who has kind of proven that, man, that they're not afraid to rise to the occasion either when you look at, again, some of the wins they have this season and how well they've played, specifically a team that offensively has just, they've hit another level this year, and that's been the difference so far for the Bulldogs.
Well, I pointed out a lot this year that you look at the minutes that these guys like Chaney, Johnson, Dylan Carr, like these are all really, really good players. They do a lot of things that got unnoticed because of Johni Broom. When they're on the floor, they play exceptionally well. But let's not kid ourselves. The scoring punch and all the things he does, and even the outside shooting for Auburn. Broom's a big passer. And when you've got so much attention on one guy, that opens things up from the others, and it's kind of hard to extrapolate the Johni Broom element from this team because of the looks that he probably gets his shooters, and how they're able to do in this game, Max, against a team that is crafted out of your own heart with the way they get after you, the way they defend, their size, their length, their athleticism. I'm very interested to see if the looks for Chad Baker, Mazzara, and all those guys on the wing will be what they have been in the past, because not just of the absence of Broom, but because the size and the length of Melendez and Matthews and all those guys and their ability to close out spaces very quickly. Although, having said that, that didn't go so well against Kentucky.
Yeah. I mean, both teams kind of have the great equalizer, right? It's like the microwave 3-pointers. I mean, you can have Josh Hubbard, you can have a hand right in his face. You can even be right up there contesting him. He can still make it from anywhere, anytime, even though he has been a little bit less of himself the past few games. But still, they have a guy that can just go off. We've seen Miles Kelly do it multiple times this year, especially at home. So both teams kind of have that, like, just, kind of jailbreaker, if you want to put it that. Like, you can talk about the matchup all you want, but if that guy is hitting his shots, well, just throw the game plan out the window type of thing. Both teams have one of those, which makes this a very explosive type of offensive game. But I think it's going to be decided by the defense, guys. Usually when a team is down a player, you have to get extreme focus from the bench guys. You have to have extreme buy-in, because there's no room for error. I think I'm going to be looking at the game of a Chaney Johnson. How many minutes do you get out of Chris Moore? Or is it more Jaheim Hudson this game? Mm-hmm. Or is it a Ja'Kai Howard game where he, really, shows up? One of those kind of bench guys, 6'6" or taller, I think is really going to have to step up here in the absence of a guy like Broom.
Well, I think too, it's the guard play of Auburn this season. We said was going to be a story, and the fact is they've been tremendous to this point. Like, we're not, think about if it was different, if let's say the guard play was a little underwhelming, and we're sitting here saying, they just lost Broom, front court, Superman, and now we got to see, can the guard group step up? That's not the story, because they've already proven that, like, they've been fantastic, like taking care of the ball, all these other things. And so, like, we don't even have that to use here as the, like, be scared if you're Auburn. Like, they've just been that good. But again, it's going to be matchup-wise. Chris Jans, I think, is very good at this kind of stuff. Like, what's he going to throw at Auburn? Like, schematically. Love using the word schematically anytime we can here at Southeastern 16. But schematically, what is he going to throw at Auburn without Broom? What is he seeing on the film that makes them look at it and say, hey, there's where we can really take advantage of this. This is how we're going to defend them, and this is how we're going to win, right? That's the kind of stuff I'd love to know. Like, I'd love to know what he's identifying as he's watching them. Because like we said, there's not a big sample size. He's got a second half against South Carolina. That's it in terms of this particular team. But if you watch them play, you're trying to figure out where can we exploit this situation. I think that's what's going to be interesting. Two teams that, again, offensively, they have hit another level this season, but we just have to factor in that one of those is going to be without the guy who has helped them get to that level in Auburn, and so it just makes it harder to accurately, I think, predict exactly how this game is going to play out from that standpoint.
I think we've done so many shows together. We think like each other automatically. And Blake just brought up a lot of things that I was going to bring up about Auburn. And let me just use this time to illustrate. Looking at College Basketball Reference, Chad Baker, Mazzara, Tahad Pettiford, Denver Jones, Miles Kelly, Chaney Johnson, all listed as guards. Baker, Mazzara, from three-point range, 37%, 12.7 points a game. Pettiford, 42%, 11.3 per game, been even bigger in some of the games that have really mattered. Denver Jones, 45% three-point shooter, 10.5 a game. Miles Kelly, 43% from three, 10.3 per game, can hit them way beyond the arc. And Chaney Johnson, only 25% from three, but 10.1 points a game. If we were not spending so much time talking about Broom, we would be talking about the exceptional depth and shooting ability of this Auburn backcourt. So, beware. This is still a tough team to face without Broom. That said, Max, State has got to get Josh Hubbard going a little bit more. They won at Vanderbilt without him doing much because R.J. Melendez was big in that game. and didn't really come on late, got in a little foul trouble against Kentucky. I think they kept him on the bench a little bit too long, and that hurt State's chance of winning. But you have seen this team generate some offense too. Claude O'Hara's not a guy we talk about a ton, but he can hit the threes. I think that's a setup to watch too, is what does State get? Because I think you're due to see better scoring from Hubbard.
Mississippi State has played 3 true road games this year. 3 of them. They played Ken Palm's number 51 team, SMU, on the road. They won that game. They played Ken Palm's 33rd ranked team, Memphis. They beat them on the road. They played Ken Palm's 52nd ranked team, Vanderbilt. They won there on the road. This is obviously a massive step up from a Vandy, a Memphis, and SMU. However, we cannot pull on an angle of Mississippi State has played poorly on the road. They've arguably played their best on the road. So take that for what you want.
Picks.
I think a major factor in this game is going to be the free throw line, and I'm talking about the lack of it. Okay, both teams really do not get to the free throw line. If this was a Texas A&M, if this was a Missouri coming in here catching a Janai Broomless Auburn team, I'd say, hey, now this is a team that's going to get to the free throw line whether you like it or not. And a Dylan Cardwell foul trouble, a Chaney Johnson foul trouble. Oh boy, you could see some eyebrows starting to raise, some alarms starting to go off. However, this is a Mississippi State team that really does not get to the free throw line too much, very perimeter oriented. I think Auburn has enough depth underneath. It's a team that's only lost at home 3 times in the past 2.5 years. I'm going to go Auburn here.
I'm super impressed with Mississippi State. I think it called a bad beat with the Kentucky game. I think it is a tough-minded team. That kind of team does well on the road. That said, nobody plays with an edge like Auburn, and when they play inside that arena, they're like Superman putting on 3 capes at once. They play loose, they play aggressively. They just have this demeanor about them that we were invincible there. That fan base knows they are going to need a pick-me-up with who they are playing and who they are playing without. Give me Auburn. I don't think it's a blowout, but I still think Auburn is number 1 on our power rankings for a reason, even though they are losing potentially the National Player of the Year. Supporting cast has been good enough. That has been the difference in them being just a really great team and an elite team. I think Auburn gets it done in this spot.
Well, here's what's interesting about that. If you look at the series history, there is one of those teams that's sort of been a thorn in the side of Auburn in terms of like the actual way the game is played out. Now, Auburn beat Mississippi State by 15 last year. That game was also at Auburn. They may have played twice last year. I think they did. Mississippi State won the home game. That's right, in Starkville. But if you look at like some of the recent results, just at Auburn, 2023, Auburn wins by 6. 2021, Auburn wins by 7. 2019, Auburn wins by 5. 2017, like Auburn wins by 6. So again, these are all different years. Every team's different. I get that. But like we do like to look a little bit at the history, right? Whether it's the Kentucky, Mississippi State, whether it's the fact that Missouri had beaten Vanderbilt every single time they had ever played in Columbia. And so all those kind of weird statistical trends that seem to be happening. Now you take Mississippi State on the road, the best team they've had there in 20 years, against a team that's missing its best player, right? That's kind of a pretty fascinating setup, if you ask me, given how close some of the games have been between these 2 teams in that building. The difference, I think, is that while I believe Chris Jans schematically is pretty good at finding those matchups and being able to exploit them in this scenario, I will counter that by saying I don't know that there's another coach in the country that I trust more to motivate his team after something like that than Bruce Pearl. And for that reason, I'm going to pick Auburn to have that sort of chip on its shoulder a little bit, knowing that people are out there saying, hey, now's where the downfall begins for the Tigers, right? I could absolutely see them playing that up a little bit and using that to pull off a win here. But I would also say, think about this for a second. Had Mississippi State beat Kentucky at home, how many of us would have picked them in this game? Guilty. I guarantee I probably would have. I probably would have picked them. Like, and maybe it's. I'm not saying it's obvious, but I may have gone out on a limb and picked them. Right? You never know, but it's something to think about. And yet, we thought they played really good in that game against Kentucky.
Yeah.
They just happened to get outscored by the third best offensive team in the country right now. So it's interesting.
I got one more little nugget before we wrap up, Chris. The day is March 21st, 2019.
Uh-oh.
Bruce Pearl's Auburn Tigers beat Chris Jans's New Mexico State.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I remember that.
Final Four run.
By
almost
1 point.
thwarted.
That much.
Right off the bat. Yeah.
78-77 victory for Auburn. Ended up going to the Final Four. That was Chris Jans's New Mexico State team. A little bit of history.
Yeah, that was a fun game, and that went literally right down to the wire.
Yeah, I had an inbounds play to win it, and just didn't happen. Yep.
I remember that.
So.
Well, we'll be here to talk about it afterwards, so hope you will join us for that. Best way to do it, subscribe. That is free. Enable your notifications. That lets you know when we go live. So hope you will tune in then. For Max Barr and Blake Lovell, I'm Chris Lee. You've been watching Southeastern 16's basketball content.